Welcome, everyone, to the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and for the better part of the past 26 years, I've had the honor of working alongside and coaching some of the world's top performers. What we do here each week is we bring their ideas and their wisdom to you, directly to you. If you feel like you're stuck on that hamster wheel of life and you're just spinning and not really going in the direction you choose or would love to, well, you've landed in the right spot. The Bamboo Lab podcast is written, created, and broadcast just for you, all you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the Bamboo Lab podcast, feel free to jump on our website. That's www.bamboolab3, and that's the number 3.com. All right, just some statistics to share with you as of this recording. We are now being followed and subscribed to in 6 continents, 22 countries, almost every state in the union, and almost nearly 600 cities across the country. So we're growing rapidly, and we're growing because of the great guests we have, including the one today. All right, I'm going to read a heart letter that we received I think 3 or 4 days ago from Tyler, one of our adamant listeners, and he said, I listened to your recent podcast tonight. Coach Fred is an amazing man. You keep bringing knockout guests every single week. Well, Tyler, I don't think we're going to disappoint you with the guests we have on here today either. All right, this podcast is dedicated to a subscriber and follower who has been with us since January 3rd at the beginning of our journey. Mark, this goes out to you. Very strong, kind, successful man who recently suffered a minor stroke and is recovering, back to work already, and showing that grit and fortitude and sisu that makes him the person he is. We're all in your corner, Mark. We're all fighting with you, and we look forward to you coming back full force, and you will be a guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast in the future. All right, before we introduce our amazing guest today, I want to share with you a few guests we have coming up booked. We have Doug Linick, the CEO of Think to Perform, which Doug is a classic gentleman. He is an icon in the industry of leadership and development and personal development. We have Jeff Chadwick, former Detroit Lions, Seattle Seahawks, and I believe Los Angeles Rams receiver. And we have Gay Hendricks, one of my favorite authors. He has written so many books. I can't name them all, but my favorite is The Big Leap. And he and his wife have been seen on Oprah, and now he'll be on the Bamboo Lab podcast in the near future. All right, let's dissect. We have today a guest that I've been trying to get on for a while, but because she was jet setting around the world, it took us a little while to connect. But we have Julie Stenberg. Julie has 3 sons, and I have to say their names because I love them. Brock, Dalton, you guys all heard of Roadhouse and seen Roadhouse, and Carson. And she has been married to her amazing husband, Steve, for 34 years, and she calls Grand Haven, Michigan, her home. Julie is an amazing woman. I have had the pleasure of following her on Facebook for so many years. We actually share a few connections, personal connections as well. Her practice is titled Called to Lead Coaching. And throughout this podcast, we're going to recommend that you jump on her website and check out some of the amazing things that her clients have said and are saying about her. And I'd like to read one right now, actually. This is from a woman who is a children's grief therapist, administrator, and activist. So I'm going to read, it's a little long, but she reads, I was feeling stuck in life, but I lacked the courage and focus to move in a new direction. Julie's workshop materials and leadership helped me to define my goals on both an emotional and practical level and set me on the right path. Through the workshop sessions and goal-setting homework, I successfully made a career change and found my dream job. Julie's coaching style is a wonderful mix of empathy, enthusiasm, insight, and high expectations. I highly recommend Julie's workshops for anyone who needs help with goal setting and envisioning something new and better in their lives. Thanks to Julie, I am living my life's purpose instead of watching from the sidelines. That's pretty powerful. Julie's an award-winning master certified leadership and life coach. She helps motivated people to harness their values and passions so they can love and be loved. I love it. Feel confident and engaging and achieve the lifestyle and business they've always wanted. She has helped hundreds of ambitious people, from business owners to stay-at-home moms, MIT grads to hospital executives, to help them shed their self-doubt to create lives and businesses that are uniquely designed just for their values and passions. She's also a certified John Maxwell speaker, trainer, coach, and consultant, and a disc behavior analysis coach and consultant. Enough said. Welcome to the Bamboo Bamboo Lab, Julie.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. That's quite an introduction.
Wow. Well, there's so much to say. I mean, I got on your website to do some research, and there's so many testimonials. I'm like, how do I pick one? So it was like a roulette table. I just had to land on one and had to read it off. So I think the Bamboo Pact here in the lab is going to be get a great deal out of our time together, Julie. You have so much to share. And the things you posted on Facebook and your social media just as a reflection of, it's a small chunk, but it's a reflection of the person you are and how you help people and your clients. And I want to tell the audience today that we're going to have dogs barking in the background. Julie's got a dog, and I've got a couple bouncing around here. And I just know the UPS or FedEx man's going to come to my house. So if you hear dogs, that's awesome. We're just having a conversation. So welcome. Julie, tell the Bamboo Pack a little bit about yourself. Who is Julie Stenberg?
Well, to go back to the beginning of time, I am the last of 5 kids. I was born in Muskegon, Michigan, which at the time was a growing industrial town. And then when I was 4 years old, my parents bought a failing hardware store in a small northern Michigan farm town. And they built us a little paradise on a lake. I think they really wanted, my dad was very connected to nature and the spirit of adventure. And he also had that entrepreneur heart. And this is kind of where I developed the ideas and beliefs that really sustain me today. I had that front row seat to entrepreneurship and servant leadership. I saw my parents plant themselves within the community, build relationships with all walks of life. Everyone needs to go to the hardware store sooner or later. And I got to experience the growth and hardships of a family of 5 kids in a rural town. So I learned a lot of the simple and widely useful lessons of running a business, being a friend, embracing motherhood, and having a team philosophy for all pursuits. We're in this together. And that was kind of the upbringing. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities or expectations as a kid. I was, other than school, it was the outdoors is your playground. And that was quite lovely. When I see what kids go through today and all of the schedules and the play dates that are put on the calendar and having to drive from here to there and lots of commuting, I look back on my own childhood and think how nice it was to feel that I had an entire day in front of me with nothing expected of me but to explore and experience things.
I agree. I don't think my mother knew where I was from 1980 to 1986. So
that is the God's truth. We always laugh that I had to be home by the time the sun hit the tops of a certain set of trees. So as long as I was home by then, I was in good standing.
So they didn't have you on 360 or find a phone or find a friend on their cell phones to know exactly where you were at every minute? How did we ever survive? How did we survive that?
And the funny thing is I would play on other people's property all the time. Like, I know that there's new kittens at this barn over here, so I'm just going to go in the barn and hang out with the cats all day. And I never asked anybody permission for that, or usually they would put me to work doing something, carry this or take that up to the hayloft, or carry this bucket over the goats over here. Usually they'd find some task for me to do, but it was never like, hey, do you knock on the door? Do you mind if I play with your cats? No, I just did it.
People were a little more trusting, it seemed, back then.
Yes, the best memories I have were of becoming just a fixture in people's lives. I was the youngest, so I thought that I had all the freedom that my brothers and sisters had. Never occurred to me that they had, 13 years experience on me.
Wow. Yeah, I'm also the youngest of 5 as well, Julie. In fact, the next youngest in my family is 7 years older than I am. And I think my oldest brother is 13 years older than I am. So 13 or 14. So I grew up the same way. By the time I came along, my mother just said, have fun all day, be back at lunch, be back at dinner. And I took advantage of that. Growing up, Julie, who were your greatest inspirations? You had such an amazing childhood with your father being an entrepreneur in the hardware store. And I'm sure, like you said, you met so many people coming and going. We all need nails and we all need hammers. So with that in mind, who made Julie the person she is?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Get the latest insights from top mortgage pros on Mortgage Connects, a podcast by MGIC. We interview thought leaders from across the industry to share their wide-ranging expertise and candid views on critical market developments and current housing trends. Our guests reveal highly effective marketing and referral strategies, training tips and best practices, and what you can expect from the mortgage market in the future. Hear from experts like best-selling author Todd Duncan, U.S. Bank's Lenny McNeil, and Freddie Mac's Danny Gardner. Listen to Mortgage Connects on your favorite app or at mortgageconnects.com today.
Well, I think my first inspiration were my school teachers. I felt like they had all the secrets to life that I wanted: the reading, the writing, the creating art, making beautiful spaces, using my body to do things that I liked, like riding horses and sports and dancing. And I was always absolutely lit up by learning things. So I really wanted to be like them and have all of those treasures. And one little quirk is I've always had an affinity for paper products, like construction paper and colored Kleenexes and tissue paper and things like that. I loved it, and I loved making things from it. And teachers always had a lot of paper. So they were really, I think, my first inspiration. Because when you're a little kid, you don't think about being inspired much. You're just learning things, you're figuring out how the family works and where do I fit in here. So they would be the first. But then my dad, he's equally inspired by books and teachings and sharpening the saw. We had millions of evening discussions about learning things and being curious. And when he eventually sold our hardware store and he went back to his brain work of being an engineer, and he held court at our dinner table each evening, talking about who he had worked with, what they had expected, what he expected, the mistakes that had been made, and how he was going to get in front of the lessons beforehand. And I think one of the most influential things I learned, while I was playing Barbies in the corner of the dining room and Mom was clearing the table and my brothers were off doing chores, and my dad talked about reading all the time. And he talked about how many reports he had to read in his job and how much research he needed to do and documents presented to him to be good at what he did. And he had to find time to read all of these things as well as be a leader in the company. And so he was going to invest in a speed reading program. Now, this was in the 70s. Right. So the day this speed reading program was delivered to our house, which delivery trucks were not a common thing out in rural Scottsville, Michigan. So when that truck came and 3 large boxes were left at our door, filled with binders and cassette tapes and workbooks. I was absolutely, this was a treasure chest landed on my front steps. And so he would come home after work and he'd put on these giant headphones and listen to those tapes, and he filled out those workbooks, and he became a speed reader. Yeah. And he got so he could read a James Michener novel in a matter of days. And I am certain you have read a James Michener novel.
Oh,
am
yeah.
I right?
Chesapeake.
That's
one of my favorite of all time.
Yeah, yes. So that's what he loved to read as far as novels go. And when I saw that he could read that thick book in, 3 or 4 days, I was absolutely, now this is a thing that I need to be able to do. And when he was done with that program, he gave me all those boxes. It's probably the coolest thing I've ever owned. Now, I will say I was probably 8 years old at the time, so the reading material was way over my head, but I learned a lot of skills. I also look back on that as he didn't care if I was 8 years old. He thought I could do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And that if I didn't know how to do something, I could learn how. And that's probably the most important lesson I've ever been given in my life.
Now, can you speed read now, Julie?
I wouldn't say I'm a speed reader. But if I have to take a college course or a certification, I become a speed reader. So I don't find it as enjoyable as really digesting a book. Mm-hmm. I love to read slowly and thoughtfully, and I love to take notes on my reading now. But, I can use it if I must.
Okay. Yeah, because I know the Mitchell's novels that I've read, I started reading Hawaii right before we went to Hawaii this year, and I actually gave up. I gave up on it. I ended up buying a book called Sisu by Katya Pansar, who was a guest on a previous episode, and I loved that book. So that was a little easier, not easier, but a little faster reading for me. Can I ask you, because I think the audience would love to know, because you're such an avid reader, thought leader, and thinker, what would you say are your most impactful 3 books you've read in your life?
Oh, I had a feeling you were going to ask me this, and I did not plan it. So
I have to throw a couple of trick questions in, Julie.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anne Frank is one of the most impactful books to me. I actually taught it when I was a literature teacher, but what I did read it as a child as well, and the impression that I received from Anne Frank's writing is so hopeful and forgiving. One of her lines in the book is something like, despite everything, people are inherently good at heart. And when I think of that, she is a young girl hidden in the attic, unable to go outside, who is turned in by a neighbor. The belief that she still has that people are inherently good. This message has sustained me through all of the things that have happened in the world. Mm-hmm. I go back to Anne Frank. So that book is very impactful to me. I found a lot of joy also. Well, it's strange to say joy, but I found a lot of joy also in Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Because of the American dream theme there, that we are all capable of creating a scenario that we've wanted. Mm-hmm. Not that it turns out so well for the lead character, but
yeah.
But I mean, we know that life is going to present 50% happy, 50% crappy, and we just need to build the tools to withstand the storm. And that book was a big one for me. And then more recently, I have really loved the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I've read it multiple times. I don't know if you've read this book, but it is a book for creators. Have you read this?
I have not. In fact, I'm on Amazon right now on my side putting Big Magic.
Yeah. So this is a book for creators, and the belief of Elizabeth Gilbert's belief is that we are all artists and creators, even if we're not using it as our method of earning, or that we all have the desire to make something from nothing, where before there was nothing. So be that writing, be that a program, be that a song or a poem. And right about the time that I start feeling like, oh, who wants to hear what I have to say? I go back to read her book. And it reminds me that it doesn't even matter if somebody wants to read what I have to say. I have it to say.
Right.
And I have it to share. And I feel that it's valuable to me. And so I put it into the world.
I love it. Well, I just put that in my Amazon cart, so.
Yay! Yay, you!
I would.
It will be very different from the other things that you read, I think.
Yeah, I try to stay somewhat diversified with my reading, but I sometimes get stuck. I'm going to recommend, if you haven't read the Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, it is a life changer.
Okay.
I read it probably 3 years ago for the first time, and I've recommended it to probably 90% of my client base. I bought it for some family and friends, and I'm now listening to it on Audible, and this is my fourth or fifth go around. So I read it twice, and I think this is my second or third Audible listen. So it's, right. I think just knowing your personality, you would love it. He's written books called Conscious Living, Conscious Loving. He and his wife have several books out. They've been on Oprah talking about their books. It's it's great material. I want to take a quick break and just announce to the Bamboo Pack just to replay some of what Julie just said, because I don't want this to go missed. Number one, when I asked Julie her inspirations as a child, the first thing she said was, first off, her school teachers. So for all of you school teachers out there, thank you. And remember, you are having an impact not just on that child at that moment, but on the woman or man she will become in the future. And you help create an incredibly amazing person here in Julie. And so your impact is widespread. Also, I love that she said she's always been lit up by learning new things and sharpening the saw. And that her dad, really stressed this idea of reading and believed in her at an age of 8 that she could do the speed reading. And that's a pretty, I don't know how much confidence I would have in an 8-year-old in speed reading, but just the fact that her dad believed in her helped her to get through that and learn something, and really probably a lesson, obviously, years later, she's talking about here on the Bamboo Lab podcast. So it stuck with her. So the idea of us as adults, as believing in our children or young people or even adults, the idea that we believe in somebody can give them such great confidence. But I also want to share some of the quotes from the book she wrote, or her favorite books. Anne Frank, despite everything, people are inherently good at heart. Now, we live in a society that we can be very cynical, and we see a lot of the negatives in the world. In fact, I think the studies show, University of California, Berkeley showed studies that for every one positive thing we see, our brains see 9 negative. Anne Frank was in an attic being hunted by the Nazis and was turned in by a neighbor, living in fear, living in poverty, living in near starvation. And yet she saw the inherent goodness in all people. And I think that's so powerful. And, 60 or more years later, she has had such an amazing impact on the world. The Great Gatsby, we are all capable of creating the scenarios we want. That's powerful stuff. I haven't read The Great Gatsby since I was in probably high school. Maybe I should pull it out. And then Big Magic the book I just put in my basket. We are all artists and creators, and we can take something from nothing and put it out there in the world. I think those are really amazing lessons that Julie's already shared. So, Julie, you alluded to when we were talking about the books, you mentioned it's helped me get through some things in life, some moments or something you said. So can I ask you the tough question is, what's the most difficult thing you've ever gone through?
Well, if you had asked me this 20 years ago, I would say that I grew up the last of 5 kids. And when I was about 8 years old, my oldest brother was suddenly afflicted with schizophrenia.
Okay.
And this was the 70s, so it was, there were very little known about mental illness and the brain. It was kind of the beginning times of even realizing that the brain has a chemistry. And I watched my family absolutely be destroyed from the core of loving each other. And we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. But the best we could do was pretty terrible. And so if you had asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have said, living in a family blaming itself for the loss of one of the most golden personalities any of us would ever know.
Okay. Thank you.
But if you ask me today, now that I've lived, and now that I realize none of us died of that, none of us were destroyed by that, and that we all managed somehow to make lives and get married, have kids, become something. In the midst of that hardship, and I've coined that word, hardship.
Like that.
In the midst of that, every one of us thought we would die of this. And that would include my 8-year-old self, my mother, who was, back in the 70s, it was always the mother's fault. My father, who had seen in his son a chance to get it right, as all parents try to do. And then all of my siblings who were next to him and who had, plans for being brothers with him or being a sister of his. And we all lived.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, we tried real hard not to. We all tried real hard to destroy ourselves because of how inequipped we were. And we've had, recurring trauma because of this. So I would have described myself 20 years ago as the sister of somebody who had schizophrenia. I don't describe myself that way anymore. I know that it's survivable, but I'm changed.
Can you say, when you look back on that, Julie, that moment of time in the 70s and, of course, the years that came afterward, where would you find the nugget of power in what you guys went through? What was the silver lining in the cloud that now you can recognize years later?
Well, my brother has since passed on.
Okay.
And until he passed on, I would have absolutely said there is no silver lining, that it is devastating and destructive, and there was not one good thing that came of it. However, when my brother died, I heard a voice. And this was a voice from the beyond, and it said, live. And it wasn't a whisper. It was a booming command to live. And I thought, well, aren't I living? I'm living. I'm living. I'm married. I have kids. I went to college. I have a job. I'm living. And it made me, I said, well, you don't hear a voice from beyond and just pretend it didn't happen. And I went into a lot of research and reading and discovering what it means to be alive and what it means to live as an action and not a receiver of the events that are presented to you. And that is the day that I made a decision to leave my job. I created my company called Imaginary Voices. It is connected deeply to my brother because a lot of his symptoms included hearing voices. And I say that we are alike in that I hear messages that are probably in my imagination and my subconscious, and he heard messages that he could not process. So we're alike. We have voices, and I am never going to discard or disregard my inner being for the events that happen in the world. And that is the greatest gift.
Whew. That's a little more powerful than I expected. And I really do love just the statement, live, and you dissecting what it meant to be alive and what it still continues to be alive, to truly live consciously on this earth. And I think that if I was a betting man, I would bet my last 7 paychecks and my next 7 paychecks that your children and Steve and your clients and your friends and your extended family and now the Bamboo Lab podcast listeners are very, very happy that your brother sent that message and that you received it and actually did something proactive with it. So thank you to your brother for reaching out to you, and thank you for listening and not discounting it and making such a difference in the world from that statement, from that one voice that you heard from the beyond. That's good stuff.
It's a hard story to tell, but I know that I'm not alone in having heard messages from people who have passed or the message. And when I say messages, it's not always words. It's sometimes just an understanding or a set of beliefs that evolves from your experiences. They're not intended to be forgotten because the world is busy and complicated.
Right. Well, can you tie that into something you said a few moments ago that I wrote down, Heartship? Mm-hmm. Can you explain that to myself and the listeners, what hardship means to you?
Well, we're all going to be presented with a set of struggles and obstacles and challenges. And it starts, when you're a baby. And the things that you attach your emotion to and feel aligned with the problems that you face that become your tests in life and then become your testimony are not hardships. Like, hardships are different. They are, just tests that you must pass through in order to proceed to the next level or whatever. But a hardship, to me, is something that your identity reflects in the things that you do with gusto, the things that you do with conviction. We all do hard things, but not necessarily with conviction. We do them because, this is expected of us, or this is just one of the things on my list. But the hardships are the things that affect us and become a piece of our identity. They are our DNA makeup. Wow. That's the best I can do.
I love that. No, what my original thought was on hardship was along the lines of what you just explained, but I'm glad you clarified, because it certainly changed my thoughts of what that terminology was. I love it. Julie, in life right now, as you've experienced a lot of hardship, challenges, tests, and hardship, and as you have really taken this message from your brother to just live, what is a win for you right now in life? What would you consider to be a success or a win?
Let's see. I really love building relationships with people that develop into a lifelong trust of being able to share information and stories and feelings, but also the deep knowing that you're there and you're still going to be my person. So a win for me, okay, I've got a really good example.
Okay, good.
A win for me is I became reacquainted with a childhood friend recently. Well, it was last year, who found me on Facebook, and I had moved away when I was 12, and then she had moved across the country and lost touch with everyone, and we found each other on Facebook, and she started following me, and she sent me a message, and she said, I just want you to know that you are exactly the same kind of person that you were when we were in third grade, and you were always creating fun things for us to do on the playground, and you would take everybody, and everybody had a role, and they might not have been fast runners, so you would find them something else to do, or the idea that I still am living the way I was when I was in third grade, like that my person is still the same kind of person. Mm. To me, that's successful. That means I'm living in my authentic self. The gifts that I've been given, I didn't become so affected by the circumstances of life that I can't still be her. So I guess that's a win for me.
That's a wonderful win. I'm just trying to write down here. So to the listeners out there, I want to recap a few things before we go further. I really think what Julie said about hardship, that's an incredible word. Did you make that up, or did you create that word?
I think I did.
Well, you did now. We're going to give Julie Stenberg full credit for the word hardship. And what I saw what clarified for me was when you differentiated that from the word hardship, where hardship is a test that we're going through, a test that kind of becomes a testimony to us, and it's in your DNA, it's your identity, it reflects who you are, and the things that you do with gusto and passion. Where hardship, you do them, but you're not really doing them with necessarily passion or gusto. That's a really powerful word. And for the listeners out there is think about what she said when I asked her the question, what is a win for her? And what it came down to was living her authentic self. And that's something that when she was a young child, this gift she was given of being able to kind of bring people in and build the relationship and trust. And I think, for lack of a better term, is even inspire them. She still has that. It's in her DNA. And she's still using that today as a wife, as a mother, as a friend, as a coach, as a speaker, as a writer, and changing people's lives with that. So I'm going to ask the Bamboo Pack out there, what are the gifts you were given as a young child? What are those unique skill sets that you have? Going back to a previous episode, what is your butter? That unique skill set that makes you different than other people. It makes you uniquely qualified to help other people or change the world in a better way. We all were born with something, or we acquired it at a young age. And so many of us lost track of it. So going back and digging deep into your soul, into your head, into your heart, and determining what is that, pull it out. It's still there. And you were designed and created to take that to the next level and make the world and the people in it a much better, to change the world, to sculpt lives, so to speak. All right. What's next for Julie?
Well, I've kind of moved away from coaching individual clients one-on-one, although I still have long-term people who really benefit from that model. I've kind of transitioned into more of a hybrid framework of group training, one-to-one coaching, and a shared experience live coaching. I guess my time as a teacher and an educator, I've come to understand that while we like to keep some things private and personal, it is important to have social learning, being able to learn in front of other people and letting other people see the realizations happen within us. I think it has more tooth to it. It's sort of like a positive peer pressure to grow and evolve. Sometimes in a one-on-one atmosphere, strictly one-on-one atmosphere, there's a lot more allowances given for, well, I didn't do the work, or I got busy, or when you're in front of peers who are also striving and trying to be better, it inspires you to also be better. So I've really added that into my my programming. And then on top of that, the isolation of the last 2 years, I think has really challenged the space of personal and professional growth. We are a social species. We need to connect with peers. We sometimes need to up-level the people we hang around with. And when in the one-on-one, realm, you don't necessarily have that opportunity. So that's kind of why I've tried to move more into that hybrid coaching model. And then I'm working more in corporate situations where the leadership has recognized that their people need coaching in order to get back to performing at their highest levels. The shutdown, work from home, back to work transition, kids being home more often, sort of the world as we know it has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years. And then add to that the emotional and mental unwellness of our society from that and any number of other influences. This affects people's work more than ever before. And companies want their people to be strong and contributing members. And so they're investing in differentiated programs that don't come from a can. They don't necessarily want a bunch of talking points and quotables. They have real problems and they need to find real solutions. So they're reaching out for these hybrid coaching programs and the personal connection that comes along with it. I always say that I am a mother from the get-go, and our people could use a little mothering.
I agree.
And then on top of that, we're going to have the workforce shortage, doing more with fewer people, more green people. Companies need their employees to be higher performing than ever before. They need to sharpen their saw. And the saw comes with a lot of different teeth. And sometimes, that strictly professional development thought isn't enough. And then I'm also writing and revising a lot in my future. I'm currently working with a publisher on a nonfiction book. The working title is Life is Calling. It is a framework for pursuing the well-imagined life. And then I'm revising and editing my fiction novel, which was inspired by my experience with mental illness. The working title is Imaginary Voices, and writing that novel was the processing of thoughts and feelings of living in a family with a schizophrenic person and the flawed people around it. And although it's most definitely a work of fiction, it is about a woman who thinks she's going crazy, and she leaves her family behind for a summer and starts a new life with a new name and tries to discover if indeed she's going crazy or not. And, it's a work of fiction, but I have a lot of inside experience with those things.
You sure do. I want to, any idea when those would be ready for all of us listeners?
Publication takes a long time. So I am thinking the nonfiction work will be out in 2023. And that the fiction piece is probably going to be longer because I'm going to pitch agents for that book.
Okay.
So I did pitch it a few years ago, but my last 10 years of coaching has informed my writing even more. So I'm revising that for fresh pitches.
Well, I can tell myself, as well as I'm safely guessing, many of the audience and listeners are going to be anxiously awaiting Life is Calling and Imaginary Voices. So those are the working titles, folks. So now, if you can't find those in the next year or two, just go on Amazon or wherever, go to Julie's website, which is Call to Lead Coaching, and look for those books to be released. For now, in the meantime, all of you can look on her website and look for Powerhouse Women, Dream to Success, a book that Julie has written parts of and collaborated with other authors, really written by a lot of very successful women from their perspective. So that's a book we can start with now and buy and read and enjoy and learn from, and then anxiously await the next two that are coming out.
That would be awesome.
So before we wrap up, Julie, I want to ask one last question, and you might have already stated this, but that's okay to state it again because I think the audience needs to hear it. If you were to leave our audience with one big lesson, a piece of wisdom, a mantra, something that you've acquired in your life, what would that number one thing be?
I guess an enduring message that I have learned and through a lot of hardship is that no matter the situation or circumstance you find yourself in, it is temporary. That life is a continuum of seasons, and while some seasons seem to last forever, this is all a cycle, and it is always open to change. And you can change it.
Perfect. I'm writing down. So listeners, please write that down. And I'm paraphrasing a bit because I'm not a very good writer, so I have to write really very quickly. So no matter what the situation or circumstance you find yourself in, it is only temporary. Life is a cycle, and it is open to change, and you can change it. Thank you so much, Julie. I want everybody to please take a moment today or in the next couple of days and get on Julie's website, Call to Lead Coaching. from what I can see and everything I've heard and everything I've read, and obviously we've had a couple of conversations, I would highly recommend, if you find yourself really wanting to go to that next level in life, professionally and or personally, look up Julie's workshops. Look at her hybrid coaching method that she's creating, which I think is pretty ingenious, and explore that. Reach out to her. All of her information is on there. She has a very nicely put together website. And I'm going to really recommend, take a look at this. My weekly podcasts are good to learn the wisdom of my listeners, but going deeper can be extremely necessary for many, many of my listeners out there. And I think Julie's a great place to start. So calltoleadcoaching.com, calltoleadcoaching.com. Okay, I'm going to leave with one thing, and then I'm going to thank Julie for being here. And that is, I got so many things. I've got a page of notes, and many of them are in highlights and circled. But the one thing I really got out of this, and I just want to take the time again to thank her brother for speaking to her from beyond and just saying one simple word: live. I think so many of us really, really need to hear that. And I'm sure that message she received from her brother years ago from beyond has had an amazing impact on her life, therefore on her family, friends, and clients. And now it's had an amazing impact on me as the host of the Bamboo Lab podcast. And I believe with many of you, you can take that out there in the listener audience and really take that to heart. Live consciously. I mean, what does it mean to be alive? And we go through the days and we go through the moments and we go through the weeks and we're struggling and we have strife and turmoil and challenges and tests and we face these brick walls on a consistent basis. And we so often tend to kick our heels and stick our feet in the dirt and turn around and retreat. But that's not living. Living is moving forward on a consistent basis. It's sculpting your lives to be a better person every day, a better version today of the person you were yesterday and a better version of tomorrow than of the person you are today. Live. Take his message from beyond and change your life, and therefore the lives of the loved ones around you in the world as a whole. Julie, this was an amazing time. I'm so glad you gave me a little extra time. I know I told you it'd probably be close to 30 minutes, and I think we're at 51 minutes now, but I hope the audience and the listeners got as much value out of it as I have. And I just want to take this time, Julie, once again to thank you for being such an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you so much.
No, it was an honor. It really was. It was more than I expected, and I had high expectations. All right, listeners out there, thank you once again for tuning into the Bamboo Lab podcast. Please find us on most every platform: Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. I think we're on now 35 or 38 platforms. Please rate us. Rate whatever you think. I mean, I just want ratings. I don't care if you think I'm a 1. Make it a 1. But I think with guests like Julia, they should be a 5. And please write a review, subscribe, follow, and then refer us to 3 people, because the messages my guests have can change lives. And if we can change enough lives, we can change the world. In the meantime, get out there and sculpt your life. Every day, strive to be the best version of yourself. Show love and respect to others around you. And by all means, just like Julie's brother said from beyond, live and live consciously. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Bamboo Lab podcast.